Let the Bible Speak with your speaker, Brett Hickey.
If righteousness exalts a nation, and Proverbs 14:34 says it does, we need to pray for our country to get right. We know that the effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much, James 5:16. And the Holy Spirit tells us in 1 Timothy 2, verse 1 and 2, to pray for all men, for kings, and all who are in authority, that we may lead a quiet and peaceable life. Folks, God can answer these prayers. He's answered them before. Did you know who first put the New Testament into English in 1525? William Tyndale. How was he rewarded for this by the ruling authorities in England? Just 3 years before, King Henry VIII commissioned the first English Bible authorized for public use, the Great Bible, in 1536, Tyndale was burnt at the stake for putting the Bible in English. His last words were a prayer: "Open the eyes of the King of England." This year is the 400-year anniversary of the majestic King James Version of the Bible. More than 6 billion copies of the Bible in more than 2,000 languages and dialects have been sold, and over 1 billion copies of the King James Version alone. We need to pray today for something else. We need to pray for our president. We need to pray for the Congress and for the Supreme Court as it concerns another extremely important issue. Many of our governmental leaders say that abortion is not murder, that abortion is not the killing of a baby. Others say they just don't know for sure. During a televised debate before our last presidential election in 2008, preacher Rick Warren asked then Senator Obama, "At what point does a baby get human rights in your view?" He responded, "Well, I think that whether you're looking at it from a theological perspective or a scientific perspective, answering that question with specificity, is above my pay grade." Because many in prominent positions talk this way, some Republicans and most Democratic congressmen think this way and legislate this way, the most dangerous place for a child, strangely enough, has become his mother's womb. In a May 22, 2008 article on Gallup.com entitled "Abortion Issue Laying Low in 2008 Campaign," journalist Lydia Saad reports from Gallup's annual Values and Beliefs Survey that Americans as a whole are slightly more likely to call themselves pro-choice on abortion than pro-life, 50% to 44%. Guttmacher.org says that about half of the 6.4 million pregnancies in 2002 were unintended, and almost half of the unintended pregnancies, 1.3 million, ended in abortion, while only 14,000, or about 1% of the unintended and unwanted children, were put up for adoption. Do you realize how many abortions that is? Far too many. Every minute in the United States, 3 babies are legally aborted. That's 180 every hour, 4,000 every day. Next to biopsies, abortion is the most common surgery in the United States. This is a blatant disregard for the 6th commandment, "Thou shalt not kill." But let me ask you, does it even bother you? We want to explore this further and let the Bible speak on the subject. But first, enjoy our song. On bended knees I pray, before I start the day, I ask for help along the toilsome weary way, this weary way, for help to run my race, for trials Perhaps you've asked yourself this question: how do some physicians and politicians justify abortion? Some say that the baby is just a blob of tissue. The term fetus is used, at least in part, to depersonalize the baby. Think about it. Have you ever asked when someone's fetus was due? Just a blob of tissue or fetus? Which is it? A Kansas state representative said that at 7 months, the unborn child looks a lot like chopped liver. One Planned Parenthood physician called abortion the treatment for the number 2 STD. At 25 days, before the mother even knows she's pregnant, the baby's heart is beating. Come on now. Do blobs of tissue have heartbeats? At 30 days, the baby has a brain of unmistakable human proportions. Eyes, ears, mouth, kidneys, liver, and blood pumping that is often of a different blood type than his mother. You mean that this unborn child has a different blood type than its mother and it's a fetus? It's just a part of the mother's body? No single human has ever had 2 blood types. At 45 days, the baby has measurable brain waves. How do we determine when someone is dead? When their heart stops beating and they no longer have brain activity. So what if someone has a heartbeat and brain activity? Wouldn't that constitute human life? Now get this. Almost all abortion takes place after the baby has a heartbeat and brainwave activity. We need to pray that God will open the eyes of our President, Congress, and Supreme Court so that Roe v. Wade, the Supreme Court decision that has led to the legalized killing of almost 50 million babies in the last 35 years, might be overturned. With all due respect to President Obama, and we are commanded to honor him in 1 Peter 2:17 and Romans 13:7, the facts are available. And not just from a biblical, but also from a medical standpoint. Consider the testimony of a series of embryology textbooks. The Developing Human, Clinically Oriented Embryology, 6th edition, Moore and Persaud, reads, the zygote results from the union of an oocyte and sperm. A zygote is the beginning of a new human being. Human development begins at fertilization. This highly specialized totipotent cell marks the beginning of each of us as a unique individual. Human Embryology and Teratology by O'Rahilly and Mueller. Quote, fertilization is an important landmark because under ordinary circumstances, a new, genetically distinct human organism is thereby formed. Human Embryology, 3rd edition, by Bradley M. Patton. Quote, it is the penetration of the ovum by a spermatozoon and resultant mingling of the nuclear material each brings to the union that marks the initiation of the life of a new individual. Biological Principles and Modern Practice of Obstetrics by Greenhill and Friedman. Quote, the zygote thus formed represents the beginning of a new life. Pathology of the Fetus and the Infant, 3rd edition by E.L. Potter and J.M. Craig. Every time a sperm cell and ovum unite, a new being is created, which is alive and will continue to live unless its death is brought about by some specific condition. In 1981, a United States Senate Judiciary Subcommittee received the following testimony from a collection of medical experts. Professor Micheline Matthews Roth of Harvard University Medical School. Quote, it is incorrect to say that biological data cannot be decisive. It is scientifically correct to say that an individual human life begins at conception. Dr. Alfred M. Bongianni, professor of pediatrics and obstetrics, University of Pennsylvania. quote, "I have learned from my earliest medical education that human life begins at the time of conception," end quote. Dr. Jerome Lejeune, professor of genetics, University of Descartes, quote, "After fertilization has taken place, a new human being has come into being. It is no longer a matter of taste or opinion. It is plain experimental evidence. Each individual has a very neat beginning at conception." Professor Jaime Gordon from the Mayo Clinic, quote, "By all the criteria of modern molecular biology, life is present from the moment of conception," end quote. Dr. Watson A. Bowes, University of Colorado Medical School, quote, "The beginning of a single human life is from a biological point of view a simple and straightforward matter. The beginning is conception," end quote. The conclusion of the official Senate report reads, "Physicians, biologists, and other scientists agree that conception marks the beginning of the life of a human being, a being that is alive and is a member of the human species. There is overwhelming agreement on this point in countless medical, biological, and scientific writings." Popular scientific reference works reflect this same conclusion on when human life begins. Time and Rand McNally's Atlas of the Body states, quote, "Infusing together, the male and female gametes produce a fertilized single cell, which is the start of a new individual." Britannica says in an article on pregnancy, "A new individual is created when the elements of a potent sperm merge with those of a fertile ovum or egg." Even if overwhelming evidence did not exist, but there were reasonable doubts about whether the baby in the womb was a living human being, you wouldn't say, "Well, we're just not sure, so go ahead and abort." Wouldn't you wait until you were sure that the fetus was just a blob of tissue before you legalized what amounts to torturing the unborn child and throwing it away? What if I shot one of my friend's longhorns while deer hunting on his property? Would he be okay with me saying, "I saw something move in the tall grass and thought it might be a buck"? Of course not. In light of all this talk, it's amazing that in New England, there's a $1,000 fine for shipping pregnant lobsters because it might harm their unborn. Legislation in Massachusetts makes it a crime to award goldfish as prizes in games of chance because it is cruel. Some people make an ugly compromise. They say, "I'm against abortion, but I'm pro-choice. I believe a mother should have the right to decide for herself." You know what that's like? That's like saying, "I'm pro-choice when it comes to child abuse. I personally oppose child abuse, but I believe each parent should have the right to choose." This is similar to the person who says, "Don't legislate morality." What? Isn't it legislating morality when we make laws against stealing, against drunk driving, etc.? Of course it is. Emotions really run high when you confront this question. What about in the case of saving the life of the mother? I understand that in nearly every case, the baby can be taken by C-section and both mother and child can be spared. United States Surgeon General Dr. C. Everett Koop said that in his 38 years as a pediatric surgeon, he was never aware of a single situation in which a preborn's life had to be taken in order to save the life of the mother. Dr. Alan Guttmacher of Planned Parenthood, the leading provider of surgical abortions in the United States, acknowledged, "Today, it is possible for almost any parent to be brought through pregnancy alive, unless she suffers from a fatal illness such as cancer or leukemia, and if so, abortion would be unlikely to prolong, much less save, life." Dr. Landrum Shettles says less than 1% of all abortions are performed to save the mother's life. You won't hear much about how many women die from abortion either. In 1986, 4 doctors and researchers found that 193 women had died during legal abortions from 1973 to 1985. Women who have had abortions are 9 times more likely to commit suicide. Women's World magazine reports that 45% of women who have had an abortion had thoughts of committing suicide afterwards. A study in Spain has revealed that 80% of women who have had an abortion suffer symptoms of depression, while 40% have considered suicide. Physically and psychologically, the risks associated with abortion are much greater for a woman than actually giving birth. What about in the case of rape or incest? Only those who have endured rape or incest can comprehend the horror of such. But is abortion acceptable in such cases? The Guttmacher Institute says just over 1% of all abortions are due to rape or incest. Does violence against the mother justify violence against the baby? My friends, we don't even have a death penalty for rapists. I know a man who is a child of a rape victim. Did he deserve the death penalty because his mother was raped? No adverse circumstances for one human being change the nature and worth of another human being. What motive do women have for having an abortion? What could make having an abortion so important? On average, according to the Alan Guttmacher Institute, women give at least 3 reasons for choosing abortion. Number 1, 3/4 say that having a baby would interfere with work, school, or other responsibilities. Number 2, about 3/4 say they cannot afford a child. And number 3, half say they do not want to be a single parent or are having problems with their husband or partner. These are the primary reasons people have an abortion. Can you believe it? Remember this: the love of money is the root of all evil, 1 Timothy 6:10. One of the factors that eluded me for years is that abortion is a $1 billion a year business. Planned Parenthood receives hundreds of millions of dollars from state and federal governments. In an article entitled Obscene Profits by Michelle Malkin on nationalreview.com on June 4, 2008, the annual report of Planned Parenthood Federation of America revealed that the abortion giant had a total income of $1.02 billion, with reported profits of nearly $115 million. On average, a doctor receives about $800 an hour performing abortions. What about the Bible on when life begins? It would be tragic if all abortions were done by atheists or agnostics. But 43% of women obtaining abortions identify themselves as Protestant, and 27% identify themselves as Catholic. Those claiming to be Christians should be especially repulsed. Solomon lists hands that shed innocent blood among the 7 abominations of Proverbs 6:16 through 19 as a sin that particularly disgusts God. We shudder when we think of Manasseh in 2 Kings 24:3 and 4, who filled Jerusalem with innocent blood, or the heartless, horrific Holocaust in Jeremiah 7:31 and 32, where God says, "The people, as an offering to false gods, burned their sons and daughters in the fire, which I did not command, nor did it come into my heart." We recoil when we read in Exodus 1:22 that Pharaoh ordered every newborn Hebrew male to be thrown into the river, or when we read of Herod putting a mark on baby Jesus. Remember, when Herod learned that the wise men had deceived him, Matthew 2:16, that he ordered the massacre of all male children in Bethlehem and in all its districts from 2 years old and under. But Herod and Pharaoh are small potatoes compared to the United States. But does the Bible make it clear that God's view of life starts well before birth? Yes, it does. Did not He who made me in the womb make them? Did not the same one form us both from within our mothers? Job 31:15, Psalm 22:10. And now the Lord says, He who formed me in the womb to be His servant. Isaiah 49:5. The word of the Lord came to me saying, before you were born, I set you apart. Jeremiah 1:5. In Luke 1, verse 41 and 44, The Bible speaks of John the Baptist before he was born, toward the end of the second trimester. And it happened when Elizabeth heard the greeting of Mary that the babe leaped in her womb. For indeed, as soon as the voice of your greeting sounded in my ears, the babe leaped in my womb for joy. The Greek word used here for baby, brephos, is the same word used to describe, get this, the baby after Jesus was born in Luke 2, verse 12 and 16. This is the same word used to describe the babies brought to Jesus for his blessing in Luke 18, 15 through 17. And this is the same word used in Acts 7, 19 to describe the newborn babies killed by Pharaoh. The sixth commandment, thou shalt not kill, is all about recognizing God as the creator and the sustainer of life. And since God made man in his own image, human life is sacred. That makes abortion an attack on God. Jesus said in John 8:44, you are of your father the devil. He was a murderer from the beginning. Satan hates life and hates children as much as Jesus loves them. Where do you fall on the spectrum, with Jesus on the loving children end and the devil on the hating children end? Are you neutral? Unsure? Somewhere in the middle? I hope not. Once the sanctity of life is rejected, there is no limit to the depths of depravity in which man may descend. Consider the progression of the Holocaust. First, abortion became common. Next, the killing of babies after birth. Then Hitler executed 275,000 handicapped adults. Then came the Jews. If man honored the sixth commandment, thou shalt not kill, none of this would have happened. Choose life. If you'd like to get a DVD copy of this message, stay with us, and we'll tell you how to do so right after our song.
I may not climb to brilliant heights of glory, no laurels will be wreathed about my name. When others tell or write of my life story, there'll be no hint of wealth or power or fame. A better part I'm chosen as life's calling. A Christian's love, true love that shall not fade away, but leads beyond this world of strife and sorrow, beyond to that fair land of endless day. If I can smile and make some heart feel lighter, if I can love and then be loved again, if by my life some other life is brighter, I then will feel I have not lived in vain. A better part I've chosen as life's calling, a Christian's love, true love that shall not fade away, but leads beyond this world of strife and sorrow, beyond to that fair land of endless day.
Just a word, if you are one of those folks who has actually had an abortion, you need to understand that God will forgive you for this just like he will forgive you for any other sin. God is a compassionate God, and we've all made mistakes. But primarily, our message today has been geared towards warning people of the danger of committing this sin. If you have questions or comments about this lesson or any other Bible subject, if you'd like to get a free copy of this lesson, Thou Shalt Not Kill, number 795, on DVD or transcript form, we'd like to hear from you. Until next week, goodbye and God bless.